The world is waking up to the power of crypto, and we are seeing this with new NFT and token launches every day, all using blockchain technologies. We're also seeing huge marketing spends by crypto exchanges and platforms, and so this season, we are speaking to the marketing leaders of those crypto companies. Hosted by Brave Software and me, Donnie Dvorin. You're listening to a new episode of the Brave Marketer podcast, and this one features Maddie Taylor, and he's the head of growth at Solana Labs and has been obsessed with cryptocurrency ever since he wrote his undergraduate thesis on the economics of proof-of-work consensus mechanisms. And prior to Solana, he was at ZeroX and also at Square. I think you're going to really like this episode because we're going to talk about what makes Solana different and their user experience, and really talking about how the community drives the growth of Solana and less like traditional marketers or marketers for cryptocurrency companies. And then Maddie's also going to talk about what excites him about DeFi, and he breaks it down and gives a great analogy, just like the movie The Big Short. But before we get into today's episode, we want to highlight our Brave Pick of the Week. And every episode, we choose a brand that has run an ad campaign with Brave. And this week, we're choosing Unstoppable Domains. So Unstoppable Domains recently ran a Cyber Monday sale with Brave ads to promote their buy one, get one on NFT domains. And they ran a single day burst of push notifications globally in tandem with a US sponsored image to raise awareness and generate site traffic. And it's a pretty cool company because you can buy Unstoppable Domains. And so now for this week's episode of the Brave Marketer. Maddie, welcome to the Brave Marketer podcast. How you doing today?
Good. How are you, Donnie?
I am doing well. Thanks for taking time out to sit with us. Why don't we jump right in, and why don't you tell the audience what's the most exciting thing that you're working on right now?
We've been running a lot of hackathons every few months at Solana, and I think that's been a really exciting thing for the community to participate in and, contribute to. And so we're planning our next one, and I think that's been a big focus area of mine. So yeah, really excited about that and to get more builders interested and educated on crypto.
Cool. What are you guys hacking? Like, do you give out different assignments?
It's a community event, and we're a big contributor to it, where it's not like a traditional hackathon where you go in person and it's like over a weekend and you spend 48 hours trying to create some proof of concept. It's more kind of a model where it's a longer time frame and it's online. So it's anyone in the world can join these things, and it's usually about 6 weeks. And by the end of it, it's more of a way to like kind of introduce your product to the Solana community and investor kind of class. And so I think it's more of a product competition or launch that people get really excited about and have a lot of, I guess, time to connect with other builders who have a similar idea and create awesome projects.
Cool. Could they have been working on the project before the hackathon started, or like they started it and then they ended it within the 6 weeks?
Yeah, so that's something that we kind of go back and forth on. But I think generally you should start the project when the hackathon starts. If it's a couple days or like even like 5 or 6 days before, not a huge deal. But I mean, if you've been working on this project for 6 months, those people can apply too. But it's just that the judges and the community will only kind of evaluate your project based on the work that you did during the hackathon time. And so that's kind of the deal.
When was the last hackathon? Was there any like interesting projects that came from it?
Yeah, for sure. So our last hackathon ended up in mid-October. It was called Ignition. Had 7,000 registrations, about 600 project submissions, many of which have gone on to raise, tens of millions in seed funding and are kind of off and running. And so these are great just kind of community events to kickstart your project, get some seed funding.
Were they like DeFi projects, or were they like yielding
across
farming?
The board. I would say the biggest category is DeFi, but there's projects in Web3, there's gaming, there's NFTs, and there's all sorts of different projects in between. And so, it's a wide-ranging event.
That's amazing. So our companies have done some work together. We had a big announcement. So we have our wallet that we announced. We announced our partnership with Solana at your event in Lisbon. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Sure. It's a really exciting thing that Brave decided to integrate with Solana. It was great listening to Brendan talk about the reasons for that. And awesome to have you guys in the ecosystem and bringing on, so many users. I think you guys are something around 30 or 40 million monthly active.
Actually, we were 42 million at the conference, and then since the conference, we announced 46 million users. By the time people are listening to this episode, because it'll be in January, I'm going to guess that we'll be above 50 million users.
Yeah, I mean, so that's super exciting because I think Phantom Wallet, which is the most popular crypto wallet in Solana today, has something like 1.5 million weekly users. And then the long tail of other wallets have maybe another 500,000 of users. So total like 2 to 2.5 million users currently. And just like bumping that up to something like 50 million is insane. And this is why Solana was built in the first place, right? To handle that type of usage. And so, yeah, really excited that you guys are joining the ecosystem.
Yeah, it's exciting. We're trying to build out the wallet usage. Not all 50 million users are using the wallet, but you combine the two where we're growing our wallet and then you have access to everything within the Solana ecosystem, the DeFi products, the NFTs, all of that access. And I personally have enjoyed using Solana so much more than Ethereum. I try to do a simple buy an NFT for, a couple $100, but then I'm hit with like $200 of gas fees. And I literally just say like, forget it. And I start questioning why so many people are still so, bullish on Ethereum. But I understand why, because there's a huge ecosystem. There's a lot of developers there. But once they just start using Solana for like a second, and realize how fast it is and how limited, like how small the fees are, it's great. It's like when I send money to you and it's like as fast as me sending an email to you and you saying you got it, like that's great. With others, I'll send it to you and it's like, all right, why don't we check back in like a half an hour and see if I got it, and then all the fees. So do you just hear that same sentence over and over again every day?
Yeah, I think the phrase that we hear a lot is like, it's the crypto's iPhone moment. It's kind of the moment where you kind of get the Web 2 level feedback and response that you expect in kind of a Web 3 format, right? And I think a lot of the ecosystem projects have really taken what, Solana enables and built out these like great user experiences that feel like a Web 2 experience, which is awesome. And so, yeah. And I think like, that's not to say anything bad about Ethereum. Like Ethereum's amazing. I'm a huge fan of Ethereum. I worked in that ecosystem for a few years before Solana. And I think, there's lots of interesting use cases there still, and that will continue to be the case. I just think that for certain use cases, Solana, because of its speed and kind of like the user experience that you can develop downstream from that, is exceptional, and it's going to grow to, billions of people around the world using it.
Yeah, if you have a good product, more people want to use it. If more people are using it, you want to make it better. So for the new listeners listening, really the genesis of this podcast is the brave marketing moments, the moments where marketers took a little bit of a risk, stepped outside of their comfort zone, and exhibited bravery. Maddie, why don't you tell us about your brave marketing moment? What were the strategies and tactics that you used in that moment?
Yeah, I think I may have a little bit different way of answering this question than your previous guests. I think this will get to kind of maybe the differences between, traditional tech startup marketing and, this new crypto kind of like blockchain world. I think one thing when I joined Solana, and other people have this view as well, but it was that like Solana Labs, the company that I work for, is not going to scale this crazy marketing organization and scale out to thousands of people like you see in Google or Facebook or whatever.
So you're not running a Super Bowl commercial?
Well, no, not today. But I think it's more just about the strategy of like getting the community involved very early on to everything. Because I don't think these systems, they're grassroots, they're open source. The users are the kind of stakeholders. And I think getting them involved in things like hackathons early on, where it's not just us like running a hackathon. We may set the date of like when the hackathon is going to be, but all of the judging, all of the prize pool, the seed funding offering after the fact, all of that is community kind of run and supported. And I think that just makes it even more effective rather than us just being this single kind of top-down entity saying like, oh, this is what this event or this campaign or this should be. It's more just like getting everyone involved from day one. And I think that's been a very effective tool in just like growing an early community that feels like they have ownership over all aspects of the project. And so, yeah, I think that's been really effective.
I love the way you use the word community. I've heard it over and over again when there are new NFT drops or minting going on, when there's new coins, when there's just new projects. The first thing that everybody always says is community. You have to have a community, because if there's 3 people in a room launching a new 10,000 NFTs or a new token, but there's nobody following it, there's no community, there's no rally behind it, it's just going to die in the vine. But when you have a community, I mean, BAT has a big community, and Brave, Solana ecosystem has a huge community, then the things take off. So what do you do to excite that community?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think you kind of touched on this before, is that like as new projects get introduced into the ecosystem, just helping people, just education and awareness of like, here's a new project, give it a try. I think we are one of the kind of actors in helping new projects find new users and introducing them to the community. And I think this is kind of speaks to why the community is so important. They're so willing to try new things. Like automatically you have a user base that you can tap into from day one as a new ecosystem project, because all of these community members are just kind of dying to try out new DeFi projects or a new game or a new NFT related marketplace or whatever. And so I think that's something that's been effective. Interestingly enough, I think this kind of is just like a great marketing principle that I learned at Square when I used to work there, was the best marketers for a company or a product is not the company itself, right? For Square, it was like the merchants who loved using Square, almost to the point where people love Square who weren't even necessarily businesses that use the POS terminal, right? It was often like the users of their business. And I think that's the case in crypto too, where it's like the biggest kind of most effective evangelists or marketers in the Solana world is not us. It's all of these great projects and users that are talking about how great and fast the blockchain is. And so I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the books, like Crossing the Chasm as an example, where you have your early adopters, and then when you go into mass markets, it's the viral effect. It's people telling people about it. You saw it with all the social networks like Facebook, and you know how it grew like wildfire at the schools and stuff. And I like what you're saying about POS systems. I'll go into a restaurant now and they'll have this Toast. I don't know if you've ever seen like Toast, but they turn the screen around and you type in your tip and everything, and you can review your order. Yeah, that looks right. That's great to me versus just handing over my credit card. And then I don't know if I'm out there evangelizing Toast. Well, I just did on this podcast, but I think maybe other people are. So, Maddie, talk to us a little bit about you. So what excites you about crypto? And then go into, are you an NFT guy, a DeFi guy, a gaming guy? Like, what's your stick?
Yeah, I guess the first part of the question, what excites me about crypto, it's just this mechanism and these systems to unlock new markets. And I think that's an incredibly beneficial thing for the world. And I think in terms of what verticals excite me, I play around with all this stuff because there's great projects across the board in the Solana ecosystem. But personally, like I'm really excited about DeFi, and I think that's where crypto probably has the best product market fit outside of like what Bitcoin's doing. And so I think DeFi is particularly exciting right now with something like Solana, where Ethereum, there's a lot of great DeFi projects in Ethereum, and they kind of paved the way and showed all these various use cases, whether it's a borrow lend protocol or a DEX or even structured products or perpetual swaps and all of these different kind of like primitives. And I think on Solana, you're seeing a lot of these primitives get rebuilt, except they're just built for capital efficiency and built for speed. And I think that's where finance thrives generally. And so it's just exciting to see how the ecosystem has evolved. And yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
For anyone listening that's kind of not necessarily crypto newbie, but maybe they have some Bitcoin, Ethereum, maybe a little bit of Sol. But when you talk about DeFi, what's like the number one use case that you would use to explain DeFi and how people are using it in Solana?
Yeah, maybe I've been trying to play around with this like analogy to help people understand why DeFi is important. Have you seen the movie The Big Short or read the book? Okay. Do you know that scene? And I think this analogy will maybe kind of explain what are some things that I'm excited about. But you know the scene where, Michael Burry, right, had this view that there was something wrong with this like MBS product, right? There was something wrong with mortgage-backed securities. But first of all, it wasn't transparent into figuring out like what is even packaged in these securities, right? And so it was this arduous process for him to like go through and try to find all the data that showed like what was actually in these products, even though like credit rating agencies had it like rated AAA, right? And that was kind of like a trust in these credit rating agencies, these kind of like institutions that were telling us that like these things were safe. And even when he figured out that, one, I can't trust these credit rating agencies because I finally found the data that showed that there's something wrong here, how do I like take a position in the market to show that? Well, like the product didn't even exist, right? So he had to go to financial institutions and be like, make me this product. Let me get into this position to express my viewpoint on the world. And it was just like this, tons of legal costs and tons of, just time and resources putting in just to make a simple trade. And I think what's interesting about DeFi, and I think across, all DeFi ecosystems, is that one, you don't need to trust anyone. The data is transparent on chain. Like you can check all of this stuff instantly on dashboards that Dune provides or Nansen. Two, you can be a Ukrainian developer and have like a product idea and just like spin it up in your basement, right, within an hour and deploy it onto Ethereum or Solana. And it just works. And it gets listed on decentralized exchanges. And it just lowers the barrier for anyone that has a viewpoint on a specific asset class to take that position. And so I think that's what's really exciting. And so I just think in terms of like a specific example, I'm really excited to see how Serum on Solana has developed. So in Ethereum, like AMMs, automated market makers like Uniswap and Curve and Balancer have become really popular. I think part of that is just that it's really hard to build a fully on-chain order book in Ethereum. That's not the case in Solana, where Serum was built with this view from day one. And I think it's really started to take off as like a core primitive of how people trade. So yeah, really excited about Serum, really excited about decentralized exchange on Solana.
Right. So you're saying like being able to like kind of unpack all the securities and see what's inside.
Yeah. I mean, because all of this stuff is on chain, people have built out dashboards that show exactly all of what's included in a product. I mean, that's the nature of open source, right? Is like, don't trust, verify, and like all of this stuff is transparent from day one, unlike a lot of products in the financial industry.
Right. And then the UI UX we were talking about earlier basically exemplifies how it's all clean and you can see it all, right? I've seen like the blockchain looks like, and I don't ever want to see it again. It's just like a lot of code and stuff, and I don't really get it. But when you can show it, the keys or whatever it may be in a more visually appealing way, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think it's even more important to have a great UX in DeFi because you obviously have a lot more responsibility over your kind of actions, I would say, versus like in Facebook, if you screw something up on Facebook or there's a bug, it doesn't mean there's like a complete loss of funds, right? Versus DeFi, like you are holding your keys. That's a huge responsibility. And I think the UX needs to be very good and clean and honestly like explanatory into how to like use this product safely. And so I think it's even more important in DeFi.
Got it. There's a really big project at Brave to basically decentralize advertising. So right now when we're doing advertising, Brave is in the middle. You could almost see us like a bank. The advertisers need to come to us to execute a buy, an advertising buy, and then we execute it within the Brave browser. But there's a project called Themis, and you can search it, you could Brave it, and it's THEMIS. And we're going to be building that on Solana ecosystem. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but are you aware of that? And could you speak at all to why do you think we're choosing Solana for that?
I've heard of it, but I don't know the exact details about why you decided to build on Solana. So I'd love to hear it from your perspective.
Well, look, I wasn't at the conference, but what I do know is that when you transact in advertising and you're doing programmatic buys, you're talking about something that you need an amazing amount of speed. an amazing amount of low costs. And that's what I think about Solana. Speed and low cost. Those are like the two things I just keep on thinking about. So it makes sense that we're going to build it on Solana, and I'm sure there'll be more blog posts to come for that. So let's go in another direction and talk about crypto marketing in general. You talked about how you lead by community versus other marketers, but what do you think about kind of crypto marketing? I mean, you worked at Square before. Now you're in, the crypto field. I'm sure you talk to other crypto marketers. In what ways, and maybe besides community, is crypto marketing different than traditional marketing?
Yeah, well, there's a fair amount of similarities. I came in from a very kind of, analytical marketing background where when you run a campaign or you spend some money, you know exactly who signs up for your account. There's usually a user sign up flow, right? You know exactly once they sign up, how much they use your application, how much they're spending, and that leads to downstream things like lifetime value, right? LTV of a customer. And then once you kind of have these back-end metrics on this is what one customer is worth to us, you can take that kind of target audience and use other channels to try to attract. And you have a better way of understanding how effective your marketing is. In crypto, a lot of these DeFi applications or layer one blockchains like Solana or an NFT marketplace, there's usually no account, right? You don't know someone's email or phone number or any kind of information like that other than this random, address that connects to your application, right? You don't necessarily have a good sense then of these downstream metrics that you can build off of in terms of how you spend your marketing or what channels you use, right? And so I think that's a huge challenge and something that is an interesting kind of new opportunity to figure out how all of that works in the crypto world. So yeah, that's something I've heard a lot from other crypto marketers.
Facebook Meta just allowed crypto advertising. What do you think that says to the market?
I mean, I think it's great that things like Meta, Facebook, I think Google is also loosening up their policies as well. I mean, I just think these are traditional channels that work really well in the Web 2 world, and they'll work in the Web 3 world as well. Personally, I hope that this whole sort of advertising model changes quite a bit. And I know you guys are working on that as well to be a little bit more beneficial to end users. And so I hope a lot of these kind of incumbent tech companies get disrupted. But in the interim, it's great that they're offering this to, and I think it's especially effective for more centralized businesses. So Coinbase is very similar to any other Web 2 company, right? Or Binance or these kind of centralized exchanges. But yeah, I think it's exciting that, they get to use those channels as well now.
Yeah, exactly. I was listening to an interview recently with the CEO of Coinbase, and he was basically saying that they are a centralized company and they're a technology company, but they want to be a decentralized company, and they're not there yet. Where Solana is pretty much a decentralized company.
Yeah, I don't think of Solana as necessarily a company. It's more just that's why I keep talking about community. It's really multiple kind of participants. There's validators, there's ecosystem builders, developers, there's users using their projects, there's external developers just building on the protocol itself. And so I really don't think of it as a company. And so
what would you call it?
Yeah, I call it an open source project or an open source network.
How many people are on the payroll?
At Solana Labs, I think they're probably up to 75 people, but It's not like we have this super defined sales funnel where we know exactly every customer that's coming in. We don't know 90% of the new projects built on Solana. We learn about them when they announce on Twitter. And so it's well beyond what we're kind of working on. And that goes for core network development as well from an engineering side. And so interesting thing that Brian Armstrong said that they want to become a decentralized company, because I think there's an inherent push and pull there that I don't see that working out actually. Personally, I think it's going to be very difficult for a centralized company to completely decentralize their business, because I think at the end of the day, it's going to eat into their revenue a lot. And I think there's always this push and pull between the shareholder interests and a for-profit revenue generating business. And so I think Binance is kind of struggling with this, to be honest. They're trying to, start this like Binance smart chain, and they're trying to figure out ways to decentralize. But I think there's always this kind of contention between the two.
Got it. So to start wrapping it up, what do you think are the biggest challenges that, the crypto market is facing, or crypto marketing or crypto market?
Yeah, I think for both, I think, one benefit of being in like kind of a bull market that we are today for the most part in the last couple of years is that like it brings in a lot of interesting people that have, an ear to listen, right? Where they see the Bitcoin chart or the Solana chart or the Ethereum chart and they're like, wow, like what is this? They kind of come for the speculation, but then they're interested in learning about the actual technology and economics behind these systems. And I think it makes it easy to like basically educate people because they're so open to it. I think that education piece is the biggest challenge, is like, how do you teach people to care about the principles behind this stuff enough where they actually kind of go down the funnel, where they become an active community member, they become a builder in the space or an entrepreneur. And so, yeah, that's how a lot of the time that I, spend thinking about is just like, how do you educate people, especially if the market were to turn, because that's happened many times in the past. And it gets really hard to get people interested in this stuff when there's not this financial speculation around it.
Yeah. So last question, can you nominate another Brave marketer to be on the show?
Sure. I mean, this is just a guy that I learned a lot from in the beginning of my career. His name is Andrew Chen. You probably heard of him. He kind of led growth at Uber for a while, and he's a partner at Andreessen Horowitz now. But he is an awesome guy to listen to about just talking about like how he thinks about marketing. So I would recommend him highly.
Cool. Actually, I do have one more question. For like the first 30 days, I was calling Solana Solano. And everybody that I've ever spoken to always says Solano until I have to correct them. Where does the name Solana come from? And why didn't someone just say, let's just call it Solano?
Yeah, so Solana comes from Solana Beach, California, which is in San Diego. It's just like Anatoly Yakovenko, who's kind of the creator of the protocol. He worked at Qualcomm in San Diego, and him and his buddies used to go surfing all the time in Solana Beach. And so I think that's where the name came from. I think people call it Solano because Cardano has been up at the top of the market cap list for a long time, and people just like see the names together and somehow mix the two. And that's my theory on it, but I actually have no idea why people call it Solano.
Yeah. All right. On that note, Maddie, thanks so much. Really appreciate you having the Beyond the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, thanks, Donnie.
Thanks again for listening to the Brave Marketer podcast. To stay up to date on all things Brave, sign up to the Brave Ads Insider newsletter at brave.com/ad news. You'll get tips for advertising in a cookieless world, exclusive content industry insights, best practices for consumer privacy, and more. If you'd like to get started on your Brave ads campaign or speak to someone from the team, email adsales@brave.com. That's adsales@brave.com. And finally, musical credit goes to my older brother, Ari DeVorn, who provides inspiration every single day. Until next time.